In today's story, the subscriber has the creepiest neighbor of all time. Enjoy. So the subscriber who we'll call John, right? So John has a sister, and John's sister, let's call her Kate. Kate and John, right? So Kate and John, they're moving. This is like, they lived in the same house for their entire lives. But for some reason, right, their parents, it was either time to move, or they wanted to move, or I don't know, maybe the dad or the mom got a job somewhere. I don't know. Maybe they wanted a better school system. Maybe they needed a, more energy efficient place to mine Bitcoin. I don't know, man. Like, it's not my life. But anyways, right, so they're moving. And Emily and John and Kate, Emily and John, why'd I call him? Anyways, Kate and John, right, they like their old house. The move's a bit tough, but they're open, they're optimistic, they're really excited to not have complete weirdo psycho neighbors, but yeah, that's a little unlucky, I'm going to say, is GG unlucky, not well played. Anyways, right, so, Kate and John, they move into their new house with their parents, and it's move-in day. There's a lot of boxes to move. And, they go upstairs, and they see these empty rooms, and they're like, all right, Kate, this is your own room. All right, John, this is your room, right? And this is the Bitcoin mining room. This will be the entire second floor. No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, right, I don't know why I have an obsession with that being their reason for moving. But anyways, right, anyways. So John's bedroom faces out to the neighbor's house. Kate's bedroom's on the same floor, but it faces out to the street. It's a decently spacious house. It's a nice house. Like, there's no complaints right away with the house. Like, a decent neighborhood too. It's pretty. It's like decently. It's close to like a little mini city, but it's also like away from it at the same time, if you know what I mean. It's a nice house. They're very happy with it. But, they're moving boxes, they're moving in. John has, he's moving into his room. He's moving some boxes up the stairs. And then he hears his sister, Kate, yell, John, can you come here for a minute? And John's like, yeah, sure, whatever. She probably needed help moving something, or maybe she saw, I don't know, man, a spider or something that, she wanted him to move. So anyways, he goes down and he's like, okay, Kate, what's up? Like, what's going on? What's the deal? And she's like, this is going to sound a little weird, but I think the neighbor was just looking at me. And John's like, yeah, okay. And he looks outside the window and he doesn't see anyone there. He's like, all right, well, they're probably just curious. They're probably just curious that, who's moving in, what do they look like. I wouldn't really think of it as that big of a deal, but, that's still a little weird. Don't like being watched, but don't worry, Kate. They're probably just like, curious. They're probably just curious. So after Kate calls him and, he goes and says that, they're probably just curious, John didn't really think anything of it. Kate was still kind of like a little weirded out. Like, a little weirded out, 100%. But she didn't really think much of it either. They kind of just thought, oh, that makes sense. The neighbors are just curious to see who's moving in. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense, whatever. But that night, John, he's going to bed, and he's just like, he's playing some games, moving in. He's tired, man. It was a long move-in, right? It was a long day, kind of been a long week, because they'd have to, like, pack up the entire house. Then they had to move. Like, they decided to drive, and it was a pretty long drive. They're pretty far away, right? And then they had to unpack the entire car. They had to, set up the entire house. And John was exhausted, man. So, he, just fell into his bed, and, yeah, he went right to sleep. But, he had to wake up a couple hours later because he had to go to the bathroom. And, John was just walking to the bathroom, which was, like, outside in the hallway, down the hallway, and whatever, right? Bathroom was on his floor. And he was walking out, went to the bathroom, and he walked back into his room. And the thing is, his room, there was a window facing out to the neighbor's house. And what he noticed, right? He got a slight glance, like a little bit of a glance, and because at this point his eyes had adjusted to the dark, so he could see outside. And he got a little bit of he looked over very briefly as he was walking in, and he saw like a window, right? The window facing him. The curtains were drawn a little bit, and he thought he saw like two eyes staring right back at him. And he was freaked out for a second. He's like, oh, dude. So he goes into bed, pretending like he didn't see anything. He didn't want to startle. He wanted to be very incognito. He wanted to just kind of like slide in. He's like, oh my God, like that's kind of weird. John was sitting in bed, and obviously he did not fall right back asleep. He was sitting there like, oh my God, like, yeah, the first thing with his sister, Kate, could be excused because like, someone's just like looking at their new neighbors going into their house. Okay, that's pretty normal. But, this guy, John was walking back to his bed, right? And he was very uncomfortable sitting there because like his bed was like could be seen through the window. So he kind of like, held the blankets up a little bit to shield his face or whatever, because he was like, dude, that's not normal. Like, someone was watching me at like 2 in the morning through their window. Like, oh my God. And he's like, wait a minute. What if they're still watching me? So what he does is he takes out his phone, and as incognito, as stealthily as possible, he kind of turns it enough to take a video outside the window, right? And because he's facing like basically inside of the window. And he's done filming, he checks his phone, and it's very difficult to see. It's very pixelated, it's dark, it's hard for him to tell. But there's like a street lamp outside, as well as eyes have kind of adjusted, right? There's just enough light flooding in that he can see the outline of the curtains. And the outline he sees of these curtains, the curtains are drawn. Yeah. The person was still there, still looking at John through the window. And John was a little freaked out, to say the least. To say the very least, John not feeling so good sitting there. So what he did was he got up as if he was going to the bathroom again. And he walked calmly out of his room, and then he bolted down the hall, and he just went into his sister's room, and he's like, hey, and she gets up all startled, like, oh my God, was there like a fire or something? Did my dad's, Bitcoin miner like set a fire? I don't know why I'm obsessed with that backstory. I just am, guys. I'm sorry. I am who I am. And he goes into Kate's room, and he basically explains everything I just explained to you. And at this point, she's like weirded out as well. Even though they don't have a direct like line of sight to her, she's still freaked out as well because they were looking at her earlier. Like, understandably, she was weirded out. And she's just like, John, what do we do? Like, oh my God, this is just so uncomfortable and weird. Like, what do we do? And John's like, okay, so we just moved. That probably means that, there's maybe a decent shot that we can like move out because of there's probably something, like there has to be something. So we basically, Kate, like you and I need to figure out a way to gather evidence as kind of like proof so we can prove to our parents, right, that this is weird. Something a little weird is going on. Something not normal is going on. So, and they sit there and they devise a plan. So they sit there and they're saying, okay, our mama is definitely not going to believe us, right? Our mom is definitely going to think that we're just paranoid, or mom and dad, right? And by no means will they just move because like the neighbors looked at us once or something, or looked at us during the normal time of day. And at nighttime, they're going to be thinking to themselves, oh, these kids are just like thinking so much, like whatever, right? But we need to figure out a way to capture on video proof that these neighbors are weirdos, and that, we need to move because this feels really weird and uncomfortable. So they devise a plan that the next night, right, John was going to go back to his room which was in plain sight of the neighbors who were kind of spying on him earlier, right? But Kate, the sister, she was going to like somehow be sneakily like from a downstairs window, videotaping upwards and getting on camera proof of the neighbor opening their window and staring through the window, looking at John in his bedroom. Speaking of creepy neighbors, today's secret word is neighbor. So if you made it this far into the video, I'd like you to comment neighbor down below, Neighbor. Or however it's in the title. If you don't know how to spell it, just do that. I just like to see how many people made it this far into the video. I'll try and heart a bunch of them. I can't get to them all, but I'll do my best. Also, I'd just like to have a little on-screen shout-out of this fan art that was made for me, which I thought was pretty cool. I'll be linking the video of it in the description, so you can go, leave a nice comment or something. This was sent to me on my Instagram. You can either send me stuff or story videos like the ones I tell on my Instagram, link to the description. But while you're down there, also make sure to go, to this video that's in the description of the fan art. Say something nice. Finally, 1 like in this video equals 1 nothing delivered to your door. And yeah, back to the story. So basically, right, they have this plan in motion. And, the next day rolls around. They kind of go downstairs to figure out exactly how this plan's going to work. So they go into the kitchen and they find a pretty good window that can get a decent view of the window that the neighbors have been kind of looking out of sneakily, right? And, so they scout it out and they're like, okay, how are we going to get a good light source, right? How are we going to get a good view of it? And then, they check around, and then, the subscriber, John remembers, he's like, wait a minute. I do distinctly remember having a decent enough, being able to capture it on video enough, but the lighting wasn't good enough to prove to my parents. And that's when John remembered that outside, right, there were these motion sensor lights. So basically, right, these lights, they were set to be turned off because the parents didn't really like them because, there's like animals and stuff that would like run around, and then these like really bright lights, almost like very, very bright lights would go off, right? And, they turn them off, but you can manually turn them on and turn them off. And the idea would be they would flood the backlights with a lot of light, kind of showing like what, was caught in the motion sensor. And, John was like, those would definitely have enough light. And those kind of like flood the entire back of his house. And that's where the neighbor's house would be. So it would light up, that would be definitely enough light to catch them on camera successfully. So now the working plan that they had decided would be that, Kate would go downstairs. She would set up her camera to record, and she would kind of wait for the neighbor to start like watching, right? And, Kate would then, once the neighbor started watching, she would set up the camera and just like leave it there. That's like recording a good view of the neighbor's outside window. And then what she would do would be is she would go to another window, not in the kitchen, in the room adjacent to it, have the window be down and have like a stick or a rock or something and just throw it outside, right? Just throw something out. Yes, maybe the neighbor would see it, but either way, it would trigger the motion light. And that would be the plan. And then, they catch the neighbor on video, and then they'd have video proof. And so anyways, right, that was the plan. And, the night came around. And, subscriber, John, right, he's a little freaking out. He's not feeling so good, right? Because he's basically like, okay, so I gotta be the bait, basically. I unfortunately gotta be the bait. I gotta be like the little, piece of fish kibble trying to bait in a massive shark. Like, I don't know how I'm feeling about it. Like, whenever someone has to be the bait in one of these, like, movies, it's always like the high risk, low reward type role. It's like, it's just like, what are you gonna get? Like, obviously, it's an integral to the plot. It's integral to the plan, of course. They need to do it. However, right, it's a little unlucky. It's a little GG unlucky for that guy. Like, poor John, he needs to sit there knowing that the neighbor is going to be weirdly looking at him, just like staring, just like, okay, bro, hello, sir. But anyways, right, he gets over himself and he's like, you know what? I do not want to be in this house much longer. And if I do this for one night, we have a decent shot of moving. So I'm just going to get over myself. So anyways, right, the night rolls around and, John, he's sitting there in his bed. And he was playing some games, and then eventually he decides to turn off his light, and he's just on his phone. And he's going to make it look like he's just kind of like maybe just like going on Instagram, checking the Bitcoin miner app. I'm sorry. I'm stuck on that. I'm stuck on that plot line. And he's just going to be on his phone, make it look like he's just in bed, looking at his phone. And while he's doing that, right, what he's actually going to be doing is he's going to be communicating with his sister, as well as kind of being like, just online, checking out what's happening, just communicating in to see what's happening, right? So while that's happening, the sister's going to go downstairs. So John gets into bed, and he kind of like, he gets in there, he turns off the lights, and he just like sends a message to Kate. And he's like, okay, what's the deal? And so Kate's downstairs, and she's waiting, and then she sees it. She's waiting, she's looking out the window, she's on her phone, she's looking up, she's a little bored, and then she sees the curtains part just a little bit. So Kate immediately sends a text saying, okay, they're looking, and John's like, okay. And she's like, okay, I'm recording. I have my camera set up. And she can't text John again because she's recording this with her camera. So John just has to wait there because he knows this as well. He just has to wait there. So Kate is like, she sets up the camera. She runs into the room next to the kitchen. And, she looks up again to make sure, because she's got one shot with this, because if the person goes away and the floodlights turn on, they're probably not going to look out the window, at least for another second, right? Or at least they might even wait a couple days or weeks before they start doing it again. So she's like, I got one shot with this. She just kind of peeks over into the kitchen. Yep, her phone is still on. It didn't shut off or anything. It wasn't like, low battery mode, we stopped recording. Or like she also made it had on like do not disturb, so her friends would just like call her at the worst time possible. So she's like, all right, screw it. Takes like some kind of I think a spatula or something from the kitchen, throws it out into the yard, and thankfully she gets it in line with the motion detector, and she turned it on. Like what they did was earlier, they made sure to flip it on like right before like John went to bed. And sure enough, the lights flash on and like completely flood the backyard with light. The lights were way too bright. That was one of the reasons that they were manually turned off. And yeah, sure enough, it catches, the person in the window. I mean, Kate looks up through the window, the room next to the kitchen, and she sees the person very clearly looking at them in the window, and they actually like shut the curtain. And Kate runs back into the kitchen, grabs her phone, stops recording, checks back at the tape, and sees it. They see the person basically in perfect light with this floodlight, and Kate, sends a text to John. We got him. So basically, right, John grabs a blanket, a pillow, and goes and sleeps in Kate's room on the floor because he's like, yeah, okay, we got proof of it now. I'm not being like delusional or insane or anything. I'm not sleeping in my room. And yes, so the next day rolls around and they say, hey, Mom, can we talk for a second? And the mom is like, yeah, sure, what's up? And, they basically explain everything that I explained to you. And then they show her the video and it's very clear. And the mom says, wow, like, your dad and I actually have experienced the same thing like 2 nights ago. And believe it or not, we're actually in the process of moving. We just didn't want to scare you kids saying that the neighbors were stalking us, basically. But they're really weird. We got freaked out. And thank you guys actually a lot for bringing this to us because now we have something to show our tenants, like hard proof. We were just going to try and change it up and say that like there was mold or we didn't like it or something. But oh my God, yeah. And the kids are just like, oh my God, wait, like, you guys knew? And they're like, yeah, we just didn't want to scare you. We're planning on moving out like actually tonight, believe it or not. I was actually just about to like sit you down and kind of try and explain it to you guys without freaking you guys out. And they're just like, oh my God, like, I guess that worked out. So yeah, that night, John and Kate, they packed up the house with their parents and they were in a motel for like 1 or 2 weeks. And then they actually moved into another house. And it was like basically the realtor like saw the complaint, was like, oh my God, that's like, I'm so sorry. Had like a house in limbo, let them stay there for like a couple months. And then they eventually were settled in their forever home, happily ever after, or at least I think. Subscribe if you haven't already. Watch another story video on screen and 5,000 likes on this video and I'll unironically join the Illuminati. Peace.